Hello and welcome to an AMMACH on the sofa chat. We're here with Marie Kayali. Hello Marie and welcome.
Hi Joanne.
We're here with Jean MacDonald. Jean, welcome. And Marie Gustavo, I must get that right. Anyway, just like to welcome these folks along, and we'd like to have a little chat, a discussion. And it's the first time we've been able to get some of our experiences and other people with issues to do with mind control together. And so we're just going to explore some issues, we're going to see what comes up and have a cosy little AMMACH chat. Now, I'm very interested in starting with Marie Kayali. We're going to talk about mind control. Now, Marie, from your perspective, I know that yours has been to do with, in our interviews we've mentioned the ET issues and the missing time. Now, perhaps you can tell us, follow on from that, with some of your thoughts about the, perhaps what we'd call mind management side of things, which is part of the AMMACH name, of course, and perhaps tell us your thoughts.
Okay, well, I never really noticed that anything was happening to me, or I never really felt that I was being attacked until I actually had the first interview with AMMACH. And I just started making note of things, and mental note basically. And I noticed it was when your meetings came up, or I had something to do with you, or just to meet up, something would happen a few days before, and things that other people have been describing that I just put down to just an everyday episode, or these things happen. But I have been making a mental note, and the headaches, and they are definitely attacks, definitely, without a doubt. I've made a note and I feel them. It's like something trying to keep you away from what you're supposed to be doing, or to keep you away from other people basically who may be able to help you, or have a discussion and give you a little swap tips, or
the isolation as well.
It is definitely to keep you isolated, definitely.
Yeah. And we've got Jean MacDonald with us, and Jean, it's the first time you've been to chat with us at AMMACH, and I know that you would say you definitely have some mind control or mind management issues. Jean, maybe you could just, I know this is a group discussion, I want to open it so everybody can have some input on this side, but perhaps you could tell us how, from your perspective, when things perhaps began for you, and what really puts you into a high awareness about this kind of activity.
I think probably it started roughly about 2002, 2003, but I wasn't aware of it until maybe 2004, 2005.
Right.
And gradually, as things started happening within the house, as well as on my travels, and also to my mother in the north of England, I began to put a link between all three things.
Right. So can you then just give us a little bit of clarification there, Jean, on what things began happening?
With my mother, she was having accidents, and then she was also saying that people were going into her house at night, which people disbelieved and put it down to her age, because she was elderly.
And did you believe your mother?
I did.
Yes.
I did. I was the only member of the family that did. And she was terrified. And she would barricade herself into the bedroom.
And this was unusual behaviour for her, as far as you know?
Yeah, exactly. She did say that she knew who the local drug dealers were, and I tended to think it was probably connected with that. But then she started having accidents, and the major one ended up with the death of my father, because she was she nursed him, looked after him at home, and he ended up dying in Fairfield Hospital in Bury of MRSA.
Okay.
Dreadful death. And Mum was in the hospital at the same time, having been found in the kitchen, wedged between two units with a broken hip. And the only way they could manage to get her out of the kitchen, because it was so tiny, was on a stretcher that they used for mountaineering. And it puzzled me how she could end up in such a tiny space, wedged between two units with a broken hip.
Yes, that does sound pretty unusual, I must say. So, and what other things have been happening in your house? You mentioned that.
Well,
Jean.
every time something happened with Mum, I'd be called to the north of England.
Right.
And then every time I arrived back in London, I walked in with the sense that somebody had been in my house. It started off with the fridge going wrong. I mean, all the apparatus I had was new, a couple of years old. It started defrosting itself, then it stopped working. The washing machine, again, a couple of years old, stopped working. The drum became just jammed. Practically every piece of electrical equipment started over the years to just stop working.
So obviously to a much greater degree than you would think would be normal.
Exactly. Light fittings found removed out of the ceiling, the little downlighters. I had to lift floorboards to retrieve them. Floorboards have been lifted throughout the house. Water mains burst in a spot where you would not expect it to burst.
Was this over a long period of time, Jean?
It probably was over 3 or 4 years initially, but as that proceeded, I began to realise that things were happening to my body which could not be explained. There were marks on it. I would leave my bedroom door locked at night only to wait to find it unlocked in the morning, and it began to feel as if other people occupied my house in my absence and even had access to it when I was at home. And that's the same with my car, I have to say as well.
That's interesting too, because I know with you, Marie, you've also had a lot of problems with electrical equipment.
Oh, ongoing. I never put it down to attacks before. I just thought, oh my God, my luck is so bad, more bad luck. And it was one thing after the other. And you mentioned burst mains. I've had 3 major leaks from the flat. Well, I thought they were coming from the flat above, but it was actually in the floorboards. It was a central heating pipe. That was fixed. I had my flat insurance claim all done. Flat was all done. It was literally a day later, after the work had finished, that another mains pipe broke again, and the work was ruined. I mean, literally, I had water coming just out of every room. There was, when I went upstairs, to check the guys, I mean, it was all over the corridor. It was coming down. I live in a purpose-built block, so it was coming in all the communal areas. I mean, it was just gallons and gallons of water.
It sounds improbable.
It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. And they said it was central heating pipes, and then they said mine was about to go, so I had all my flat dug up floors. It was, everything else. But yeah, electrical things. I just put it down to, my God, my luck is so bad. Who's, giving me all this bad luck? Because it was just, I had 5 or 6 things going on at the same time, and I'm dealing with this and dealing with that, and it's just mentally exhausting. You just, it's one thing after the other trying to deal with. There's all the money costs of it and the stress, and it's just one thing after the other. And I've had electrical faults, fridges break down, TVs don't break down, but they turn on and off. I've had my satellite zapped, like the guy told me it was lightning strike. That's happened twice within a year in a block of 200 flats, and I'm the only one affected. So I'm starting to take things personally now, since I've met AMMACH and met other people and heard about the attacks. I'm starting to link them. Maybe I think mine were all attacks, because it's too many to be coincidence.
Yes.
And no one has that much bad luck. One after the other.
Yeah. I don't know. Just bring in Maria, if you've had any experience of this in your time with any experiences I know around your dreams and ET stuff. But
well, when I heard this, now I have to say that we have been living like this for
you don't
all my
notice
life.
It, do you, till other people mention it?
We have this electrical equipment breakdown all the time. I didn't relate these things to some unusual, even though it was unusual in our house. It was all the time, so to say. But I thought it's just
one of those things.
Yeah. And even in here, especially when I'm listening to Coast to Coast and other YouTube things about aliens, everything blow up in the kitchen. I don't know whether it's just because of the electricity, which will happen anyway, or it's kind of sign or somebody is doing it. I don't know, but it does happen.
Well, that's certainly intriguing, because you wonder if if this is all planned. Takes quite a lot of doing, quite a lot of orchestrating, and or is it a combination of something to do with a frequency reaching perhaps a level, like a watershed, let's say, and that starts then triggering I mean, I don't know. I'm just trying
It
to.
feels like.
Because you folks are not the first people to say this either, but it's good to come together in a conversation in this way to flag it up en masse, I think. Because, I mean, Maria, I didn't know that you'd had that experience either. That's really intriguing.
Oh, well, I didn't consider that for
I didn't.
unusual.
Yeah.
I didn't know that it's related to this area, to this phenomena. But yeah, we have having been these things, and even when I was in Slovakia in our flat, we had a lot of noises like somebody is walking. But my mother said that it's dead people because in that flat there was living a woman, and she died in that flat. So she said she is walking. But we had these things, and even in my room I had these things that she said that you felt like somebody was meanwhile in your room, that you put stuff in some place and then now they are moved. I thought that I'm just crazy, or that I don't remember these things.
Well, I know, Jean, that you said you've had a lot of that happen, haven't you? You've had
things get moved from the house. You know, I've had portable hard drives, I've had a mouse, I've had various documents, my will, you know, removed from the house. And always things being moved around.
Did you ever find those things that were removed from the house?
No, they're still missing. Computers hacked, telephone lines tapped. I've changed suppliers, but you know it makes no difference.
Yeah, I've done that. It comes with you because I've been told. I've done that. It comes with you because I've been told. I changed from supplier, and each time they say it takes 10 days for the swap over, but it's always taken 6 to 8 weeks. And they've always told me there's a tag on your line. They've actually said that to me, and I said, well, "What is a tag?" And they said it's could be an alarm, like triggered to the police station. I've no alarms. Or it could be a warden controlled environment, which I'm not. So that's all they could tell me. But it does come with you. I've had that for years, and it's moved with me, and it causes problems because it takes ages to swap it over and change it or whatever. So that's still there. No one knows who owns this tag and what it is.
That's interesting. So Maria, you've had it sort of since you can remember, really, this going on.
Yes, we had it like in our house.
Yeah. So in Slovakia as well as here in the UK?
Yeah. Yes.
It's only when you hear other people saying, you think, oh, that's happened to me as well, and maybe it is connected. I just put it down to bad luck or faulty codes. You think,
it's a lot of coincidental bad luck.
Yeah, or maybe I'm doing it with a magnetic field or whatever, or something interference. But yeah, I think it's just to actually bring you down and to depress you. I don't think it's caused by the frequency. I think it's actually done deliberately to just depress you and bring you down and just give you things to worry about. So you can't, you haven't got the time to meet people and do things because you're, worried about dealing with your issues and sorting things out.
And also, if you're very much at that level of it's more or less existence anyway, your mind isn't engaged in the higher things of life. You've
got to deal with the everyday things, haven't you? If you've got a leak in your order, you've got to deal with it, and you've got to sort out your fridge. You've got to do this. So
and again, it keeps you
occupied. It keeps you isolated. It keeps you preoccupied with sorting this rubbish out.
And Jean, when were you? So you said, was it 2004 that you were aware that things really began to change, and was there an event which precipitated that, which really kick-started it from your perspective?
From my perspective, initially it started with a property developer who appeared to want to claim rights over a piece of land that's part of my title of my property, and he'd bought along with a group of people who invest in property in the area I live in, a grade 2 listed building at the back of me, and also a small shop fitters company, and automatically thought he obtained the rights over the land for access.
Just assumed it,
but then filed for rights at the Land Registry Office, and he was refused. He was given one of 3 options, which was to negotiate or to go before the Land Registry Office people, or to go before a court of law.
But this was your land?
It was my land, and without notifying us, he just withdrew his application. So we wasn't sure why. He never stated why, and I'd already given him permission to use it as the shop fitters had used it, but he wanted to have it as a rear drive-in for the Grade 2 listed building at the back of me. I think long term it was with the intentions of doing further development, because unknown to me and without my consent, he dug up and extended the drains from the end of the drive into the property at the back of me and created 2 new chambers. And it was then obvious that he'd need water as well, because there was no water supply that went under this land to the rear property. And of course the burst water main connected with all of this, because I'd arrived home from the north of England, walked into the house, sensed that somebody had been in again. For some strange reason, walked into the downstairs toilet, which I don't tend to use, and somebody had used it. So I automatically flushed the chain. And the moment I flushed the toilet, there was this huge explosion of water, which was somehow a kickback from that flush. And it burst the connection where the water main entered the house, thus establishing the exact point at which the water main came into my property. And this was like getting up for 10 o'clock at night, and I had to call out emergency services. Luckily I was insured, and when the guy arrived about midnight, he didn't have what you call a stopcock to turn the water off outside at the mains, because I had no idea where to turn it off inside. And then it ended up where he left, and he called Thames Water to come out. They turned up at 2 a.m. in the morning and turned it off in the street. But it had thus established exactly where the water came into my house, so that if anybody wanted to tap into my water mains, they knew precisely where the connection was. And that has actually subsequently happened. They did dig up in, again, one of my absences, and I suspect sank water pipes under my land for the water supply pipe to enter, I presume, into the back area.
So, Jean, then where do you think this is? How do you think this is impacting on the perhaps the management of the mind side of things?
Well,
from the property developer's point of view, I guess is what I'm trying to.
I think it's fulfilling the threat that was made to me that my life would never be normal again.
Oh, can you tell us about that?
Yeah, the threat was made in 2002 by a third party on behalf of the property developer.
Oh,
in that I would never have a normal life. I would never sell my house. The repercussions on me would be greater than I would be able to cope with. And this threat was made by a person who had a history of threatening behaviour. So I was told by a local person. I investigated at the magistrates' courts to be told he was out on a £200 bond for threatening behaviour. Now, I'm never sure why that information was given to me over the telephone, but it was. And I'd called the police and expected them to fully investigate it. And really, they did go around and speak to the guy, but they didn't pull him in for threatening behaviour. Instead, they asked, why didn't I just release the access for that piece of land?
Oh, really? They wouldn't be working together, would they?
Well,
no,
if you look back on the facts and how things proceeded, I'd definitely say yes, because I suspect the covert police came into the equation roughly 2004, 2005. And that's when things started to get worse.
Right. Well, we also have our little new mascot here, our AMMACH mascot, who's Teddy. And Teddy's come along with Jean to say hello. Hello, Teddy. Teddy also has had a little bit of trauma from your interlopers, hasn't he?
He has.
He's a beautiful little cross between a spaniel and a poodle, is that correct?
Cavalier poodle.
Cavalier spaniel and a poodle.
And I had a lady who came and doused the house after Teddy had come to live with me at 12 weeks, and he picked up on the bad vibrations inside the house and would go into hiding. He would come out and then go into hiding, come out and go into hiding. And when the dowser came, she confirmed he had been attacked by whoever these people are, whatever forces are aimed against me. And they had, she confirmed it to me, that his tummy had been attacked and his left rear end, which, as it happened, this fur never really grew on that particular spot till he was getting on for 6 or 7 months.
Gosh, poor Teddy. That's not on, is it?
He's very much a comforter.
Yeah.
But also confirms usually in the morning to me when things have taken place during the night.
Yes.
Sometimes he won't come near me and he looks terrified. Other times he'll come up to my face and sniff my face, sniff my teeth, sniff my mouth, sniff my nose. It's as if he's checking I'm okay.
Yes. Coming back to you, Marie, I know that we were talking about having, and we'll come back to Jean in a moment, and perhaps Maria might have something to add about personal wellness and health. Excuse me, I've got a little chill. And I know that you, when we were chatting, you were thinking that maybe some health issues had perhaps predicated upon, you know, a series of perhaps continuing experiences that you'd had, perhaps to do with your teeth and perhaps to do with something else. But perhaps you could expound on that a little, and then I'll come back to Jean to talk about her health. And welcome back to part 2 of our AMMACH on the sofa. We're talking to Marie Gostova, Jean MacDonald and Marie Kayali, and we're just about to reflect on health issues and perhaps health aspects to do with some experiences. So Marie, we were coming to you. Perhaps you could continue and perhaps tell us a little bit about some of the issues you've had perhaps after dental work. I know we've talked about that before, and any other issues that you think might be relevant.
Well, generally my health has been great, but where viruses are concerned, I don't get colds, flu, things like that, but I do get aches and pains. I mean, I've noticed people have said about their knee and their back. I've had a few problems myself with nerve problems, and I did have an MRI scan and a couple of years ago, and they did say there was something on a nerve in my back, a lump or something there, that it doesn't always affect me. Sometimes I wake up and I'm in agony, and sometimes it's not there, but there is definitely something on my back, on a nerve, and they said I need to get it removed, but I haven't bothered about that. It doesn't affect me all the time, it's very rare. But as for colds and flu and things, I've never had one.
Yeah.
But recently, I think it was just before the meeting for the Bodenham Manor one.
Yeah, the AMMACH May meeting.
Yeah, I'd fully planned and intended to go to that, but I think a few days, I think we were doing the radio interview with the French guy as well.
Yes.
I was meant to do that.
Yes,
it was
that's
the same time. A few days before, the day before, my internet completely went off, so I couldn't do that. The date for the rehearsal bit, I thought, well, I'll get a router from my brother, get it set up, which I did, because the router broke down. That was all up and running, and then I just came down with this horrible, I think it was a virus, I don't know what it was, completely knocked me out for about 10 days completely. It started off with my head, my eye and my head. I just woke up, could not move my head, felt like, it was just unbelievable. I've never had pain like it. I just woke up, took some painkillers, went straight to sleep, and it was actually coming back as the painkiller wore off. So I was waking up every 3 hours, 4 hours, taking more, and the next day the headache had gone, but then I was left with this horrible sinus infection, which I've never had in my life. I had no idea what it was even, so I went to the doctor, and I think it was a new kind of virus that I've never felt, but the doctor did say to me that this could have brought on meningitis with the headache.
Really?
You should have, if it happens again, go straight to casualty. It was something quite strange that I don't know if it's going around at the moment, but I've never ever had anything like that, but it did definitely knock me out, and I think that was deliberate, so I couldn't go to the meeting. And that's happened the one before that as well. Just things happen that sort of tries to prevents me and keeps me away from people.
I must say I have
so
noticed
obvious.
it with you.
Have
I mean,
you?
when we have arranged to do something or to speak or whatever that you're going to be interactive with, always at the last, well, pretty much.
And
at the last minute.
I want to do all these things, and I look forward to doing them. And
so it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, that French one was particularly interesting because I know you were trying right up until the last minute, and you
so
just said,
weird.
"Absolutely,
That was horrible.
Not functioning.
Yeah, it was awful. It did. It just completely knocked me out.
Yeah. That's really interesting. And I know, Jean, you've had some issues, haven't you, when you feel that you have had, or not feel, you know you've had some interference health. I don't know if anybody else has had any experiences with, again, people coming into their lives on an ad hoc basis, i.e. workmen or just colleagues perhaps, who've made any impact, and for coming in ostensibly on one track and they're actually coming in on another. Marie? No? Maria?
Just only the one thing I can remember was the house next to my brother was empty for quite a while. He lives about an hour from me in Uxbridge. I live in central London, but I normally go over there. I used to go over there for weekends, but the house was empty next door for about 6 months, and suddenly an MI5 guy moved in. and I phoned out my brother a bit, stopped going, and they've moved out.
I love these coincidences.
He did come over a couple of times. We were all chatting, and he heard stones at the patio doors at the back, and he was like, well, my wife's in bed, can I come in for a drink? And he'd come in with 2 bottles of wine, try to get us drunk.
The MI5 guy?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he told my brother, first of all, who he was. I didn't know, and he told him, but don't tell anybody. So my brother, I'm surprised he didn't tell me. Normally he would have, but the guy actually told me himself. He ended up getting a bit drunk, and I didn't, because I don't really drink that much, and I can hold it when I do. But he actually ended up telling me more than he was getting from me, basically. So I did say to him, he started showing me all his cards, like CSA card, and he had I remember a blue CSA card, I don't remember the rest, but he had all these Secret Service things. I think he was in securities, he said, and he said he was off sick for a year, but he looked fine. He was doing nothing all day. Plenty of money, 2 lovely cars in the driveway. He didn't seem to be going to work. He said he was off sick with a back problem, but he was out cycling and this and that and the other. So he didn't have a back problem, but he did always come over when I was over at my brother's. He'd come in for a drink, And I did say to him one day, I said, my God, for a Secret Service guy, I said, I'd sack you. I said, a few drinks and you're spilling everything, because he was telling me, well, I'm this, and showing off sort of thing. So I think it flipped the other way around. He didn't really get any information of us. We got a lot from him. Yeah. But definitely, I think
it's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And considering the house was vacant for so long, and as I started going over there, he's suddenly there, and now he's gone. That I don't really go over that much anymore because I'm too busy.
Gina, coming back to you, I think it was very interesting that you've also worked as production manager on quite a few interesting documentaries, including the Torso in the Thames and various others to do with Saddam Hussein and monies that have gone missing or let's say redirected. And I just wonder, because I know that some of your colleagues went up the ladder quite rapidly, and you have not, and also you've had all of this happening at around the time that you were working on some of those programmings. And I just wondered, I'm just curious, do you see any relationship there? It's just a question at this point. To what's going on for you now, or to any of the...
I think if I reflect back and relate to when I was working on certain programs, there began to be a connection in the fact that I found my handbag was bugged. If I walked into a major store anywhere in central London, it would trigger off their alarm. And it wasn't until I actually wandered into one particular store and went to the desk and said, I suspect something's in my bag that appears to be triggering off your alarm, that the young lady took it from me and zapped it. And she did actually manage to clear it.
So she deactivated it?
She deactivated it.
Very
but
interesting.
Whether they put something else in after that, I'm not sure. There was also my mobile phones, which always seemed to suddenly develop problems. They were sticking, and at that time, it was probably 2003, 2004, I hadn't connected into the fact that I was being monitored. It was after that I realised I was monitored, when I was going through a tube station one morning, and suddenly one of the guys who was always at the ticket machines took my photograph, And by the time I arrived at the barriers to zap my card, it wouldn't let me through. And I'd stand back and I'd look for him to come out and let me through the barrier. And not only had he disappeared, but every member of staff had disappeared. There was no sign of any member of staff. And I try it again and again, till in the end I walked across, because this was Hammersmith and this was the Hammersmith City line. I walked across to the Piccadilly line and managed to walk through the barriers there with my pass without a problem. But when I got to Farringdon, I found I couldn't get through the barriers there. So in my mind there was a connection between me not being able to get through the barriers at Hammersmith and City to when I'd arrived at Farringdon. And
do you think that was they were identifying you?
I think they were
setting up,
identifying my movements, and it became more apparent after that that I was being followed, that I was being monitored.
Well, I know, Marie, you've had an incident of being followed.
I've had loads, yeah. I've had my phone's constantly problems, and that's been going on years. But lately, it's even worse. I mean, I can hear it ringing through to someone else when I make a phone call. The battery drains in a few minutes when I'm talking to certain people. My daughter, if I'm talking to my daughter on the line, she can hear somebody there, and she can hear loads of noises where I can't hear them.
Right.
And she's going, "Oh my God, my ear! What's the noise? What's the noise?" Or I can hear it. Sometimes we can hear it ringing through somewhere else, and it's so obvious. You know, it rings first, they answer, and then it rings through, so you can tell it's being diverted somewhere else. And so I've no doubt in my mind that, you know, everything, especially online as well. I've noticed if I'm talking to someone online about these kind of things, they have a computer problem, and we both go down straight away, and they'll come back the next day, "My God, my computer is this," and mine will be exactly the same. Or if I type out a really long email to somebody, it just disappears. I'm, "Oh my God, I can't be bothered to type that all again." You know, and you're working from your head, and you compose this long email. It's just too exhausting to do it again, so that happens constantly. So there definitely is something stopping us, or me. I can't speak for everybody, obviously.
But you also had I think you might have mentioned it in one of your interviews, actually, you know, when you were followed. I think, was it
in Peter Jones? Yeah.
That was quite interesting, because you were followed all the way through the underground system.
That was, yeah, he actually, because we got the wrong train as well, and he actually got the wrong train. I'd noticed, and I thought, well, he's done the same thing as me, but then he got off at the same stop, and then he was following across the road, and then he followed me into the shop. So that was blatant. I mean, that has happened probably.
But even the security of the shop noticed.
They actually noticed. They told me, they said, do you realise, they called me to one side, and, you know, they realised that you've been followed. And I said, well, I told them what happened, and they said he's been following around the shop for 20 minutes. They were concerned because I think because I had a child with me, and they were thinking he was some sort of snatcher, baby snatcher. I think that was on their minds more than anything else, and that's what they insinuated anyway.
So it is interesting, isn't it? All these correlations and all these crossovers from very different parts of the country, different experiences, and different genres of experience as well. And again, Maria, I don't know if you've had any issues of, I don't know, people following you, or your phone being obviously hooked into, or the computer side of things.
Well, to be honest, I didn't have a feeling that somebody is following me, but I definitely had the feeling that somebody is watching me, watching my steps, my computer. Even when I was in Slovakia, I've got email from FBI that I was watching some forbidden pages, and that it's against the law. So that was really weird to me, because there were a lot of people going on my computer, and they sent on my email. So I just wonder how they
FBI in Slovakia. So
and I just
what jurisdiction do they have in Slovakia?
I don't know. And I just wondered how they could know my email. You know, and how they could know that it was, it was probably from my computer, but they could know that it was me. You know, and
they can access everything nowadays, everything online as well.
Since then, I didn't notice. I didn't pay attention. But when I contacted you over the phone, I had weird things happening to my phone till today, and my computer as well. Some stuff are missing in my computer, or are like in other places in my computer.
Yeah. Well, I know, Jean, you said you've had loads lost taken from your computer, haven't you?
I'm on my third laptop now. The Mac, the Apple Mac book, that was killed when I transferred to BT recently, and the guy who came to put a new cable into the house, he's put a much thicker cable than normal in.
How interesting.
How interesting, yeah. And also, it said on my order that they would deliver the router later in the day, which they did. And it also said another person would turn up to show me how to use it. And he was adamant. He was from BT OpenReach, I think it is. He was adamant that he would connect it. So he not only connected the router, but also we connected my laptop to just, make sure it was working. And I kept saying to him, but somebody else is meant to be coming. He said, no, I'm doing it. And he was calling out the code, the protection code, in quite a loud voice, and I thought that was strange because it's meant to be a secret. And then he connected it, and as he came to leave the house, he's in the driveway, gets his book out and calls out my new phone number so that the whole street could hear. And again,
they're not really obvious, are they?
They're not obvious. So, and I went in the house only then to discover my laptop, the Apple book, had been killed dead. No power, nothing. And I went on one of my demonstration marches that was outside Nick Clegg's house and met one of the guys who's a whiz kid on computers. And I said to him, how can this happen? He says, so easy. Once they got you up and running with BT, they just send a virus down the line to your laptop and it kills it. So the whole thing to me then fitted, another setup.
Yeah.
So everything that's on that laptop, of course, records what has taken place from 2005 in the diary. So they've killed it on the photographs. And the same goes, I have a Mac Air book I bought in Australia, which went on my travels from Australia to New Zealand in 2011, February and March, where I was trailed all the way from the UK to Australia to New Zealand, and lots of photographs have been removed from that. And also, I can't access it at the moment, so I need somebody to help me access it.
That's extraordinary. Sorry to interrupt you. That you've travelled so many thousands of miles, and you're absolutely sure that you're being tailed or trailed. And again, there's some activity.
I was filmed.
You were filmed?
Yeah, it was all being recorded. If I turned up at a guest house, I didn't pre-book anything. I would drive, turn up at a guest house and confirm there was nobody else staying there, book the room, and suddenly it was full for the night. Within minutes of my arrival, somebody would be knocking on the back door, and the lady disappeared outside. There'd be a conversation, and she'd come back in, and her whole attitude would have changed from the greeting I'd originally had to being very cautious. Husband would turn up unexpectedly, in the afternoon from work, and then suddenly the place was full for the night.
And did anything occur or transpire whilst you were on your travels last year?
Yes, there was in a flight from Australia, Perth in Western Australia, over to Sydney, when I pre-booked my seat, arrived there and it had been moved. And they then said I couldn't travel to Sydney because I was going onwards to New Zealand and I hadn't booked a flight to come out of New Zealand. So they were adamant I had to go and book a flight to come out of New Zealand. So I went over to the flight desk to book this flight and came to pay for it. And strangely, neither my credit card would work nor my cash card would work. So for some strange reason, I couldn't draw the cash and I couldn't pay by credit card. And luck had it that my brother was with me and he said, don't worry, take the flight to Sydney, I will book your flight coming out of New Zealand. And that's exactly what I did. I boarded the flight. It wasn't the seat I'd pre-arranged to have. I was put right at the back of the flight, and sitting next to me was an anaesthetist. There was 4 empty seats to the left of me, which I thought I'd move into, but seconds before we took off, a very tall man appeared in a grey suit. He sat in these 4 seats. They pulled the curtains around him. They moved the first aid bag from the luggage compartment above him. They moved it over to the other side of the plane. Within about half an hour or so of the flight, I was unconscious. When I arrived in Sydney, there was a needle mark in my arm. And again, because I had to connect to another flight for New Zealand, I hadn't been told I had to change airports. The whole thing was so stress related, the whole journey. And once I got down to New Zealand, I was meeting a lady who was from one of these organisations that accommodate females travelling on their own. She didn't know me and I didn't know her. We met through a website, and she took me to her house, but she never frightened me. She never locked a door. She had her windows wide open. And I phoned up the banks in England to track why I couldn't get any cash. They kept me hanging on, and in the end they phoned me back. They kept me hanging on. They kept me hanging on until there was a helicopter flying overhead, locating exactly where I was staying. And the following evening there was somebody outside in the early hours of the morning. The dog was barking. The dog went outside. There was definitely somebody outside. And at that point I decided to leave that accommodation and travel to the northern bit of the North Island.
Sorry, I was just going to say, and what do you feel? You said there was a needle mark in your arm going back to the flight. I take it you found yourself waking up in the same seat that you were put in. Were your clothes, was everything in order?
Everything's always exactly, because this has happened more than once, but everything is exactly.
And did you feel any effect anywhere? I mean, was the needle mark sore?
It was, but it wasn't until after I got off the flight that you become conscious of it. Yeah. And of course, by then you're up against time to board the next flight to get down to New Zealand, and I guess it goes to the back of your mind because you think it couldn't possibly happen.
Were you perfectly capable and functioning when you got off the flight? I mean, if you'd had an anaesthetic, for example, that lasted however many hours the flight was, I would be I've been groggy from an anaesthetic before. I just wondered if you were very clear-headed when you came round, or did you, what was that like?
It depends what anaesthetic they've used.
Right, okay.
And it was a 4-hour flight, so I can't remember how long I was unconscious. Usually when this happens, it's usually 2 hours. It was 2-hour blocks.
So do you think it might have been 2 hours or nearer 4 hours that you might have been
I would have said probably nearer to 2.
Yeah.
Because the lady at the side of me was sitting, she engaged in conversation with me, and it was her that told me her husband was an anaesthetist. And there's something about whatever they use in the drugs that they use that leaves you sort of quite vague. You don't react until some time later.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so this is our conversation of AMMACH on the sofa. End of part 2. And we'll see you again in a minute. Part 3.
Drug dealers were, and I tended to think it was probably connected with that. But then she started having accidents, and the major one ended up with the death of my father, because she was she nursed him, looked after him at home, and he ended up dying in Fairfield Hospital in Bury of MRSA.
Okay.
Dreadful death. And Mum was in the hospital at the same time, having been found in the kitchen, wedged between 2 units, with a broken hip, and the only way they could manage to get her out of the kitchen, because it was so tiny, was on a stretcher that they used for mountaineering. And it puzzled me how she could end up in such a tiny space wedged between two units with a broken hip.
Yes, that does sound pretty unusual, I must say. So, and what other things had been happening in your house? You mentioned that.
Well,
Jean.
every time something happened with Mum, I'd be called to the north of England.
Right.
And then every time I arrived back in London, I walked in with the sense that somebody had been in my house. It started off with the fridge going wrong. I mean, all the apparatus I had was new, a couple of years old. It started defrosting itself, then it stopped working. The washing machine, again, a couple of years old, stopped working. The drum became just jammed. Practically every piece of electrical equipment started over the years.
Mind control together. And so we're just going to explore some issues, we're going to see what comes up and have a cosy little AMMACH chat. Now, I'm very interested in starting with Marie Kayali. We're going to talk about mind control. Now, Marie, from your perspective, I know that yours has been to do with, in our interviews, we've mentioned the ET issues and the missing time. Now, perhaps you can tell us, follow on from that, with some of your thoughts about the, perhaps what we'd call mind management side of things, which is part of the AMMACH name, of course, and perhaps tell us your thoughts.
Okay, well, I never really noticed that anything was happening to me, or I never really felt that I was being attacked until I actually had the first interview with AMMACH. And I just started making note of things, and, you know, mental note basically. And I noticed it was when your meetings came up, or I had something to do with you, or, you know, just to meet up, something would happen a few days before. And, you know, things that other people have been describing that I just put down to just an everyday episode, or these things that happen. But I have been making a mental note, and the headaches, and they are definitely attacks, definitely, without a doubt. I've made a note and I feel them. It's like something trying to keep you away from what you're supposed to be doing, or to keep you away from other people, basically, who may be able to help you, or have a discussion and give you a little, you know, swap tips, or
the isolation as well.
It is definitely to keep you isolated.
Hello and welcome to an AMMACH on the sofa chat. We're here with Marie Kayali. Hello, Marie, and welcome.
Hi, Joanne.
We're here with Jean MacDonald. Jean, welcome. And Marie Gustavo. Gustavo, I must get that right. Anyway, just like to welcome these folks along, and we'd like to have a little chat, a discussion. And it's the first time we've been able to get some of our experiences and other people with issues to do with
to just stop working.
So obviously to a much greater degree than you would think would be normal.
Exactly. Light fittings found removed out of the ceiling, the little downlighters. I had to lift floorboards to retrieve them. Floorboards have been lifted throughout the house. Water mains burst in a spot where you would not expect it to burst.
Was this over a long period of time, Jean?
It probably was over 3 or 4 years initially. But as that proceeded, I began to realise that things were happening to my body which could not be explained. There were marks on it. I would leave my bedroom door locked at night only to wait and to find it unlocked in the morning, and it began to feel as if other people occupied my house in my absence, and even had access to it when I was at home. And that's the same with my car, I have to say as well.
That's interesting too, because I know with you, Marie, you've also had a lot of problems with electrical equipment.
Oh, ongoing. I never put it down to attacks before. I just thought, oh my God, my luck is so bad, you know, more bad luck. And it was one thing after the other. And you mentioned burst mains. I've had 3 major leaks from the flat. Well, I thought they were coming from the flat above, but it was actually in the floorboards. It was a central heating pipe. That was fixed. I had my flat insurance claim all done. Flat was all done. It was literally definitely.
Yeah. And we've got Jean MacDonald with us. And Jean, it's the first time you've been to chat with us at AMMACH. And I know that you would say you definitely have some mind control or mind management issues. Jean, maybe you could just, I know this is a group discussion. I want to open it so everybody can have some input on this side, but perhaps you could tell us how, from your perspective, when things perhaps began for you and what really put you into a high awareness about this kind of activity.
I think probably it started roughly about 2002, 2003, but I wasn't aware of it until maybe 2004, 2005.
Right.
And gradually, as things started happening within the house, as well as on my travels and also to my mother in the north of England, I began to put a link between all 3 things.
Right. So can you then just give us a little bit of clarification there, Jean, on what things began happening?
With my mother, she was having accidents, and then she was also saying that people were going into her house at night, which people disbelieved and put it down to her age because she was elderly.
And did you believe your mother?
I did.
Yes.
I did. I was the only member of the family that did. And she was terrified. And she would barricade herself into the bedroom.
And this was unusual behaviour for her as far as you know?
Yeah, exactly. She did say that she knew who the